Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Fair Housing Tribal Listening Sessions. My name is Douglas Trong. I'm the Fair Housing Manager within the Housing Policy Development Division. I've been with ACD since 2018 in various positions. For those who may find it difficult to see me on your screen, I would like to describe myself. I have black hair and dark brown eyes. Today, my hair is slicked back. I'm wearing a button-up white shirt and I have a black headset. We've gathered today as part of the outreach engagement for HCD report on fair housing in California, the analysis of impediment to fair housing choice. This report will assess the state of fair housing access to residents throughout California and the barrier that people face when trying to find or maintain housing. Today, our objective is to receive feedback on fair housing barrier that tribal member and residents and Native American experience in California. We have a group of folks from ACD Fair Housing team with us today, but your presenter would be myself, Douglas, and Zach. For today's listening session, I would like to go over a few community standards to encourage an opening and productive dialogue. If you wish to speak, please raise your Zoom hand by clicking the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your screen, and we will enable the ability to unmute your microphone so you can share your thoughts. Please use the Q&A icon located at the bottom of your screen to share comments. If you want to stay anonymous, choose that option when writing your message. Also, the Q&A name doesn't quite fit the session because we won't be answering questions. We're here to listen to your input. We will be asking you some questions at the end of the presentation. Be mindful of different styles of communication and learning. Recognize that some of us are external processor who think out loud, while others are internal processor who need time to reflect before contributing. Be mindful of the space you occupy in conversations. Allow others to participate. Be curious. Embrace the opportunity to learn from one another. If someone shares something new or unfamiliar, stay curious. Take notes of their comments and revisit them later for further exploration. Use I statements. During today's listening session, when sharing your thoughts or experiences, please use I statements. This approach fosters a non-defensive atmosphere and encourages constructive dialogue. For example, say, I don't understand, can you rephrase? Instead of saying, you do not make sense. Have us explore and develop the fair housing impediment. Your firsthand or secondhand knowledge of fair housing barrier experienced by tribal member and residents, and Native American in California can greatly help our goals for addressing impediment in the upcoming 5-year cycle. If you choose not to speak today, if you think of something you'd like to share at a later point, you can always email us at aifairhousingreport@acd.ca.gov. We will be sharing by sharing an overview of AI update timeline and our public engagement plan. Next, we'll discuss current trend and existing condition in California regarding Native American and tribe in California. Finally, we will provide you with some questions and open up for discussion. We will also launch the question as posed so that you can enter your type response that way if you choose. The AI team held a kickoff webinar on January 4th, and we are currently in the listening session and webinar phase of the timeline. By March 20th, we will conduct a total of 6 listening sessions, including this one and 3 previously held, as well as 2 webinars. Registration links for these events are included in the e-blast, and reminder will be sent prior to each listening session to encourage registration. Additionally, registration links are available on ACD website. At the same time, we are seeking feedback through our community need assessment survey until April 1st. Following this, we will work to finalize our report. We plan to open the public comment period and hold hearings from mid-July to mid-August, with the finalized version scheduled for publication at the end of August of 2024. For this slide, you do not need to memorize everything on this slide. It's just an overview of our upcoming events. We'll promote them through eBlast, social media, and our website. The listening session will be conducting cover a variety of topics. We have already completed a session on homelessness, disability and aging population, and persons who are immigrants. Today's discussion will be about tribal and native people, and upcoming session will cover tenant protections and mobile home parks. You can register for upcoming session using the same eBlast and receive reminder along the way. In addition, we will host 2 webinars focusing on urban housing and rural housing in March. Our public hearings will take place from mid-July through mid-August of 2024. We are still finalizing dates and location for the public hearing. Please stay tuned for updates. Any changes due to the state budget will be promptly communicated to you. We have released a California Tribal Community Needs Assessment Survey on January 30th in English and Spanish. The survey will remain available until April 1st, 2024. We encourage everyone to complete the survey and encourage others to do the same. You can access the survey on a city website. Simply visit the main page and select Begin Survey to choose your preference language. We will continue to mention it during any public meeting held until April 1st. And with that, I will turn over to my colleague, Zach Ferguson. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug, and hello, everyone. Thank you again for being here with us today. My name is Zachary Ferguson. I'm a specialist within the Housing Policy Development Division here at HCD. For those who may find it difficult to see me on your screen, I've got blue eyes, my hair is pushed back, and I'm wearing a blue button-down shirt with a black sweater. Before we open up the discussion today, we want to share a little context about housing and tribal communities in California. While tribes and native peoples have existed in what is now called California since time immemorial, relations between the state and tribes and native peoples here began with the extreme dispossession of land. Today, there are 110 federally recognized tribes in California and many non-recognized tribes. There are also more than 1.4 million Native American people living in the state. Most Native people in California live off of tribal land. In fact, 90% reside in urban cities, which we know is the direct result of government assimilation, relocation, and dispossession policies. The same policies that result in insufficient educational and employment opportunities in many tribal communities. We also know that American Indian and Alaska Native, we also know that American Indian and Alaska Native peoples are much more likely to experience homelessness. And of course, this is all in the context of the available data from the census, the state, or other research, which often does not represent or include Native Americans, American Indians, and Alaska Natives as a result of racial misclassification or other issues with how that data is collected. In thinking about fair housing choice and tribal and native communities, there's a lot of nuance to understand. To begin with, fair housing laws don't apply to tribal housing on tribal land. In fact, the state and federal mandate of fair housing could be seen as conflicting with tribal sovereignty. It would prevent tribes from implementing a preference for their own members and housing they've developed. That being said, tribes still face significant barriers to develop housing, including systemic barriers to accessing capital, limited administrative capacity to apply for complicated funding programs, and challenges with local economic development. However, like I mentioned, most Native folks in California aren't living on tribal lands or in tribal housing and face the general housing market where we know discrimination. But off of tribal lands, there's both limited resources and ability to target services for Native populations. All of this is compounded by the higher rates of poverty and homelessness that we know American Indian and Alaska Native people face. We're now going to move into our feedback and listening session for the day. On the next slide, we'll share our discussion questions, and we're asking that you provide us with your feedback in response to these questions or whatever else you think is important for us to understand about tribes, Native peoples, and fair housing. We want to reiterate, like Doug mentioned earlier, that this is not a Q&A session where we are in a position to provide you with answers about programs or services, but rather we're asking for your input to help shape our report and help us set up the department's fair housing goals in the coming years. We're also going to be launching these questions as individual Zoom polls where you can type a response for those who prefer to engage in that way. The questions that we have for you today are here on the screen, and I'll read them aloud now. Have you ever wanted to live somewhere but couldn't, and what prevented you from living there? Have you ever lost your housing, and what would have helped you keep it? What challenges have you faced getting housing off of tribal lands? And finally, what should the state of California do to help Native folks find housing when they're living off tribal lands? So for anyone who would like to share their thoughts, go ahead and raise your Zoom hand and we'll call on you in order. We'll get through as many speakers as we can today. And I'd like to once again emphasize how much we appreciate you being here today and being willing to share your thoughts, your experiences, and your time with us. Now I'll turn it over to my colleague Veronica to moderate our discussion.
Okay. So if anybody has anything that they want to say in response to these prompts or anything else, you can go ahead and raise your Zoom hand and we'll unmute you. Right now, it looks like I have Zuri. So Zuri, are you able to unmute? Zuri? It looks like you've unmuted, but I can't hear you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put you back into the queue. Keep your hand up if you would still like to speak, but I'll go ahead and move over to Annalee.
Hi, I was just able to jump on. I'm a little bit late, but I was wondering if you're going to address the challenges that our tribal people have for on reservation, because I believe we have more challenges on reservation than off reservation.
Right.
Okay, hang on one moment here. Let me mute Zuri real quickly. Looks like we were just able to get audio there.
Okay. So Tyler, how many people we have showing up at our meetings for the youth?
The youth collaboration. Well, we're working, let's see, now the fire department.
I'm sorry, one moment. We have a hang up really quickly.
Okay, yeah. Hey, Annalee, thanks for being here today and for sharing. We were able to hear. So we appreciate your question. And of course, and the fair housing team here at HCD and specifically the tribal affairs team, we're always really interested in the barriers to tribal housing wherever they exist for tribes themselves, for off reservation or on reservation. Today, what we're kind of thinking a lot about is specifically the capital F, capital H, kind of like fair housing dynamics and fair housing choice and how that impacts folks who are living off a reservation or aren't necessarily accessing services or housing through a tribe or other kind of tribal serving entity. We absolutely invite whatever kind of feedback you'd like to share today. But I hope that's a little more helpful context for kind of what we're thinking about, again, in kind of this specific fair housing report that'll go to the federal government.
Thank you, Zach. Okay, so let me see here if we can get Zuri. You want to unmute?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I think it's extremely important the feedback that I'd like to provide. I am a fully Black woman who does some advocacy with housing and specifically with Black, Brown, Indigenous folks with CLAP Community Lead Advocacy Program. And one of the barriers that we're seeing during this period is the kind of skipping over and diluting of stats and statistics. As Mr. Ferguson stated, there are times where data could not be fully valid, but that he said our Indigenous brothers and sisters are more likely to face homelessness compared to our white brothers and sisters. But he didn't say 5 times as likely, which I think is a staggering, very tough statistic. But that should also be included when we're uplifting those stats to see that there is such a disproportionate amount and disparity there. But in addition, I know with a lot of the demographics that are being collected are not capturing our Indigenous and Black or our Indigenous and maybe Latino folks who are would be considered to be in that multiracial category. And instead of it being where everyone's heritage is being counted, there is Black, there is Indigenous, there is Latino, Latina, and then there's a multiracial category. And so it leaves out a lot of my brothers and sisters who are Indigenous and my family members who also are Black and Indigenous. And I think it does a disservice, so we're not really getting the full scope. And data is important, as Mr. Ferguson was stating. And if we're not getting the full scope, then we're not getting the people behind the data, which is the most important thing. And it does matter, especially when you're able to identify as Black on spot, and we have more covert policies in place that are kind of embedded in the system now that we don't have the overt racist policies that took land from our beautiful Indigenous brothers and sisters. But specifically, there's intertwining a lot of Black Afro-Indigenous folks because of our disparities. And both heritages should be counted, but there's also going to be more unfortunate discrimination. So that multiracial category sometimes is very deceiving because it includes a lot of people and it's not specific. So I want just to provide that feedback. It's a lot, and I just appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, sir. We appreciate your comments. Looks like next up is going to be Scott. Scott, do you want to go ahead and unmute?
How's that? Can you hear?
Yep.
I just wanted to kind of like address number 4 relating to housing for off tribal lands. I think maybe what could happen is that I want to say more ability to advertise or get the word out of programs that would be available to tribal groups in different areas. To be perfectly honest with you, I live in the San Luis Obispo County area, and it's only been recently that I've actually heard about different programs, related to Native Americans. And quite often, there's all kinds of housing programs, but usually it's some nonprofit getting some kind of grant to build housing or support housing. But when we talk about individuals, it would be kind of nice to see what programs there might be available, whether you're looking at purchasing, maybe special loan programs, or whether rental, some kind of subsidies or things of that nature. It's just the idea of learning about the programs that are available. So that's my comment on number 4.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott. Okay. And we are revisited by Nicole today. Nicole, do you want to unmute? Nicole Mendoza? Okay, so Nicole, I'll go ahead and keep you in the queue. And I'll move over. It looks like next up again is Anna Lee.
Just going back to what the gentleman said before, about not knowing about the programs that are available to the tribes, that is statewide. A lot of the tribes had no idea that these programs were available. I know a lot of the nonprofits do receive funding, and the tribes don't even know about that as well. And I had a comment, talking about the tribes that we need our own COC, representatives in the north and the south, to split the state in half. Because right now the tribes don't have access to that. We're not included, and if our people enter themselves into the HMI system, we're just being lost in the shuffle. So we're just a number. When those folks or our tribal members can be connected with a tribal COC that then can make it a connection to either their tribe or somebody that can help them. Right now, it's a disservice to the tribes. There is no drop-down menu saying what tribe are you affiliated with. So the system as it is now is failing our tribal people, and we need to work together to come up with a solution so that we can provide and give input, and also have services that our tribal people can have connection to, whether it's behavioral health, homelessness, because homelessness leads to behavioral health issues, to substance abuse, to MMIP, which is missing and murdered Indigenous people. So it's really important to get the tribes involved, and for us to create a tribal COC so then we can help our tribal people ourselves, and work with the state. The way that we deal with our tribal people, we have our own data. Each tribe has their own data, and that, we just don't have the resources for connection, and that's what we need.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna Lee.
There's a question in the Q&A chat that I'll address quickly, clarifying kind of the difference between American Indian and Alaska Native. Kind of like what Zuri was speaking to, this is just really from the census and the federal government, just one of the racial categories, ethnic categories that is used. It is, for better or worse, kind of used just as a catch-all for folks in North or South America with a tribal or indigenous kind of ancestry or affiliation. The difference between why it's American Indian separated from Alaska Native there all has to do with kind of how the federal government took, again, for better or worse, different approaches to different communities. But really, short answer is just a census thing.
Okay, thank you, Zach. Let's try with Nicole. You hit there, Nicole? You're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Okay, I'm going to put you back into the queue again. I'm going to move over to Alice. Alice?
Hi, thank you. So in regards to some of the stuff that I've experienced with our tribal members, application fees and the denials without reason is a big hardship for many of our homeless tribal people in the urban areas, and especially in our rural areas. There is not adequate housing even in our rural communities, and our small tribe, we don't even have enough housing in our areas. The thing that we discovered when we were checking out COCs is that there is only one spot on the board for the COCs for tribes, and not one tribe can speak on behalf of other tribes because every tribe is sovereign. So only having one voice at the table it doesn't work for many of our tribes. And then when we recently had our PIP count, the HUD definition of homelessness, it's not adequate for overcrowding or the homelessness where they're couch surfing on tribal lands. And those things need to be updated. And those are just some of the barriers that, I've been facing. And then also when our homeless members, they have substance abuse issues and mental health issues, and they remain homeless, there is not enough behavioral health units to serve our members and tribal families in those communities because they're often segregated, and that makes a big difference. So Native American population are often at the bottom of every list. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Okay, third time. Let's hope it's the charm. Nicole?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, I apologize. I'm not sure why my name says Nicole. I apologize. So my name is Jessie. I am a member of the Western Band of Mono Indians, Big Sandy Rancheria. I live in the Central Valley, and I also work as an advocate for individuals that have a disability. But starting off with the first question, I personally have not had that struggle of needing to live somewhere and not having access or being prevented of that. But I have family members, I have loved ones, friends that have experiences that are beneficiaries, that do receive funding that help support living for them, and they have been denied access in homes that would be available to rent because they are a recipient of HUD housing or things of that nature. I think the state needs to figure out how to enforce that they are not allowed to discriminate right off the bat. As soon as you ask for an application, if they are notified that you are a recipient, they will decline you an option. They will decline you an application for this, which is ridiculous. That should not be happening. And it does happen a lot within the Indigenous communities, as it's been stated. There is no support for an Indigenous person who is seeking housing, rather if you're on the reservation or off the reservation. If you're on the reservation, it is extremely harder to find housing. It's very slim to none options available. For my tribe directly, we're a smaller tribe. On my reservation, we are lucky enough to have one transitional housing option. It can only serve maybe 1 or 2 families at a time. Your time limit there is about 6 months to a year. So if you're not able to get the support that you need to find permanent housing, you're going to be struggling. There's no options out there. Funding is not available to tribes to support their members in this. And there just needs to be more outreach, like has been stated. When these listening sessions are occurring, are you going to the tribes directly and speaking with their members directly? Are you working with, Native-based organizations or ones that serve Indigenous people that can help provide feedback? I do agree with the statement earlier that there needs to be a tribal person for the different areas throughout the state, if not specifically to each tribe, that can assist in this housing, because even with my own housing department on my tribe, they don't know anything of these specific programs available. If you are someone who is trying to seek housing, if you don't have the land in trust for your reservation, you're not going to find housing. If you are someone who does need assistance, there isn't funding there, or you are told that you have to apply for a home loan grant through a tribal funding grant bank. That's not always accessible for everyone, even individuals who are not who are not receiving HUD support for housing. But I think the first step is doing more outreach and coming up with a plan with the state to support our Native people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I'll move over to Anne Marie, and then we'll launch the first poll.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my question. It's actually, in unfamiliar with any with this topic right now. So I actually have questions to ask and trying to understand the topic. So basically my questions does Native Americans or Native or American Indians, when you guys are on the land, is it the same type of program that the fair housing does off land? Is it the same, to try to understand it, is it the same programs, even though it's two separate entities doing it? So I just had clarifying questions of trying to understand what's the difference and how come, how come I guess you can't step into one land and go into another land and to be able to help out that way, if that makes sense.
You guys are already ready to roll.
Yeah, it's just so in front of that, I guess, Roxy had already worked with purchasing to do all the background on doing the actual buying of the items,
If anybody could help me understand that, I guess, if you could clarify.
It'll take a couple weeks to get.
Yes, just give us one moment.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. I'll start and try to kind of help. To begin with, and again, kind of what we're working on right now on this team is this fair housing report, right? And so thinking about the context of fair housing, and then as HCD, our role in affirmatively furthering fair housing specifically, and that's again trying to prevent like discrimination and the breaking of that law. Because tribes are sovereign nations, those laws don't apply in tribal lands and in tribal communities. Because again, that land, those are full government entities with the same kind of stature as the United States federal government. So those laws don't apply there. And so that's kind of the distinction between fair housing in the city of Oakland and fair housing on our reservation, is that that's fully up to the tribe to decide. And again, speaking to kind of how things may differ from place to place, right? Like I mentioned, each tribe is a totally sovereign nation. And so that everything is likely different, and that you know, includes different levels of resourcefulness, different levels of land mass, of membership, and things like that. And so I hope that might begin to kind of clarify some things.
So is there any data then that shows, okay, this tribe does A, B, C, and D for fair housing, and this tribe does A, B, C, D, and Z for fair housing? Then is there a comparison that the HUD can do and say, okay, we're going to take the best of all of these different tribes and these different sovereign lands and stuff, and say this is the housing program that will work across the board for all of it? I guess that's, do we have that data?
Hi, Anne Marie. Super appreciate your thoughtful engagement today. HUD and the US government, they do have some data that they provide to folks like HCD and California in general and other entities across the US that looks at like census tracts or poverty rates or overcrowding or substandard housing conditions, some of what we've been talking about, things like cost burden. So we have that. We don't necessarily have like an index of fair housing best practices across this. And sometimes when we talk about fair housing, we can get into you know, specific issues like households with kids under 18. But also, just to back up a little bit, today we're talking about housing people, because that is the best fair housing, keeping people housed. Hopefully it's housing they're able to choose in all parts of town, all areas, and that it's housing that meets their needs and their family. But today we're really talking about housing people, and specifically natives and things that come up in terms of serving Indigenous folks and natives. And Douglas, I saw you come off. You might have something to add. Please do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the comments, and keep in mind that, you know, we have 110 federally recognized tribe, and we also have California tribe, and not our tribe are created equal, right? Every single tribe have a different housing need. You know, some tribe are you know, have capacity, and many tribes do not have capacity to even read or where to look for, state program, city program, county program, or whatever, right? So it is very, very hard to come up with a program that tailored to every single tribes, right? So again, just kind of give you that context. And yeah, just let you know that it's very difficult to find kind of like one job shop for our tribe. And, I think the state, especially ACD is working the hardest to, provide data, provide, technical assistance, provide, anything that, give tribe, equal equity and equal access to, state funding, right? So I think, again, fair housing is something that, we are discussing today, like Suzanne said. And we're looking kind of like, get some feedback for, the housing folks here today. Thank you.
Okay, so just in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and launch the first poll, which is this first question that's on the screen here. But it's allowing people to type in an answer if you didn't want to come off mute and say anything today. If for any reason, I'm only going to keep it open for a couple of minutes for people to write a short response. If you ever have anything more to say, or if you don't get your answer in time today, you can always email us at aifairhousingreport@hcd.ca.gov. We're going to be monitoring that daily to look for any comments that come in outside of these meetings. So I'll go ahead and launch question 1. And I'll mute for a couple of minutes while people answer. Just giving a time check. I'll give it another minute or so for the written answers. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the first poll, please. Submit anything in the next few seconds if you can. And again, if you don't get to submit here, or if you have a longer form answer that you want to respond to, you can always send it to aifairhousingreport@hcd.ca.gov. Okay. So I see Annalee's hand is up.
Yeah, I just want to go back, and I know Anne Marie had some questions, and I want to make sure that, we're addressing those questions or the concerns, because I think that, the lack of information or education regarding tribes kind of has a real impact on, folks out there that have no idea. But we talk about fair housing, and housing has not been fair to tribes at all since the beginning. Our tribal people were the first that walked these lands with our ancestors, before us. And the tribes were terminated. They were also removed and relocated to other areas where we cannot build. So when we're talking about fair housing and why tribes, why we're advocating for fair housing and housing across the board, is because we were promised housing from the state, and we've been neglected for decades. We've never been excluded in the state budget until recently, and these programs do not work for tribes except for a small handful. So when we're talking about fair housing, we as tribal people are looking out for our people, not only for our own tribes, but our tribes across the state. There's 110 federally recognized tribes, and we do talk about non-federally recognized tribes where there's no such thing. It's a state, kind of thing that the states have making up with, rural tribes or people in the area, tribal people in the area, which is fine. But there's nonprofits also that they come up with these tribal nonprofits, and they can access funding that way. I know that there is tribes in the pipeline to be federally recognized, so that there needs to be a distinction there, and to show, like what the differences are. But housing across the board, we've always been excluded. And now that, we're talking about fair housing, yeah, the tribes do get very, very limited funds from the federal government. We have, for instance, we have 130 people on our housing waiting list, and that's one tribe out of 110 federally recognized tribes that are out there. So I think education is really important. So if you have, if anybody on here has any questions, go back and learn about the tribes. If you have a tribe in your area, visit them and ask them, like, what is your history? Because that's important too, to understand where we're coming from, trying to advocate for our people. And also, one last thing is, we do have legislation in with the state, and we do need tribal support for that. So if anybody could reach out to me, that would be great. Like, the more tribal people that we can get on board helping us with this is fantastic. So that is all. Hi, Doug.
Annalee.
Thank you very much, Annalee. Okay, I don't have any hands up right now, so I'm going to go ahead and use it as an opportunity to launch the poll question number 2, which is the same that you see on the screen, which is, have you ever lost your housing? What would have helped you keep it? If anybody has any additional comments that they want to make, go ahead and raise your hand, and after we close the poll, we'll continue taking comments. Just giving a time check. It's been a little over a minute. We'll give it another minute, minute and a half. It looks like we're still getting a couple of responses. I'm going to give it about 15 more seconds. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and launch the next poll as well. We don't see any hands up right now. So we'll go into question 3. In about a minute, we'll give it another minute or so. I'll close this in probably 20 or 30 seconds for anyone who wants to finish up. Okay, I have a couple of hands up here. I remember from a previous listening session that there were multiple people within the same organization who were signed in under Nicole Mendoza's registration or email address. That could be some of the confusion with the name. But right now, Nicole Mendoza is what's showing up on the list here with their hand up. So I'm going to call on that name.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, apologies for that again. Again, my name is Jessie Lara. I'm a member of Big Sandy Rancheria. As we go through the questions again, I was reminded of a specific situation that happened with a member of my tribe, an elder member who had unfortunately lost all their benefits. Social Security took their benefits away. There was no housing. This individual was homeless, going from family on the res, sleeping on our tribal powwow grounds just so he could be warm and safe. He didn't want to go into people's homes at times. There was no support outside of our reservation that could help him, including these programs that were previously discussed. No one had any knowledge of these programs. And I understand that this is for a listening session. You want to hear feedback from everyone, things that are going on, and that's amazing. That's great. This has happened so many times though, where people are coming, listening, asking questions, but there is no follow-up plan. There is no way that we can also assist and provide support to the Indigenous community within the state of California, because we're not allowed the options to have a Q&A session. We're not allowed to have the community engagement that is very well needed in any aspect of support that we're talking about in programs, whether that be behavioral health, housing, educational, employment, healthcare. These are things that need to occur. And I strongly urge you to advocate for these community engagement sessions, I guarantee you could reach out to multiple tribal communities, organizations throughout the state that would be willing and happy to provide a place and a time to have these community engagement sessions and get this ongoing conversation, back and forth discussion that could really help bring change and support to the Indigenous community. And I'm just hoping that that stays on your radar and we can push for this to happen. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with us again. Let me see, what time is it? We've got a few minutes here. I'm going to go ahead and launch the fourth question, and then Kaylee, I'm going to call on you, okay? So I'll launch this just to get it out of the way. The final question here will be, what should the state of California do to help American Indian and Alaska Native people find housing when they're living on tribal lands? I'll launch it. I will leave it open for probably about 2.5 minutes. And then I'm going to jump over to Kaylee. Just a quick time check. It's been over a minute. We'll get another minute or so. Okay, I'm going to close it in like 15 seconds. Okay. So that's going to end it for the polls. I'm going to pop over and let's see. Haley, can you unmute?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Alrighty. Thank you for unmuting me. I'm Kaylee. I'm with the DEI unit as part of HCD. And I apologize if this was already addressed. I did log in a little bit late. So I've noticed that all of these questions are kind of geared towards finding affordable housing off tribal lands. Is there a reason that they're not geared towards improving the existing houses and infrastructures on tribal lands? And the only reason I ask that is because just to sort of clarify, I am not Native, and I will say this, it's not something I am I would not consider myself educated on that matter, so I apologize if I'm wording this incorrectly, but at least from an outside perspective, it's not as a, historically, it's not as if those communities went, to reservations and other tribal lands, like that was sort of where those communities got pushed. That wasn't like a choice that they made. So, but they've spent all of this time building those are the centers of their communities and their culture, and those are places that now hold significance to them. So, I mean, as as much as you want to be able to have housing wherever, like, you do want to have those options, I think that it's also important to sort of recognize that we probably should be maybe funding, upkeep, maintenance, improvements to tribal lands themselves, making sure that they're not food deserts, making sure that the houses are up to code and affordable and safe. But I don't know if there are limitations on what the state can do in regards to that. But I noticed that a lot of the questions were geared towards finding housing off tribal lands. Is there any way that we would be able to, improve upon the existing infrastructure on tribal lands?
Thanks, Kaylee. Thanks for that. And to your point, like, yeah, all of that is correct. The reason for the way that things are worded in this presentation today and kind of the questions that we're asking specifically today is within the context of and the scope of this report that our fair housing team is working on right now. It is specifically kind of addressing capital F, capital H, fair housing, the state and federal laws, and our obligations to follow those. And the reason we're kind of this scope is about people's experiences not on tribal lands is that that's the only place those laws apply. On tribal lands, fair housing, state or federal, those laws don't apply. And so there's kind of a thing we've been kind of exploring today, which is kind of the housing that is fair, right? And fair housing in terms of our obligations as a state entity to kind of uphold those laws and what is a discrimination violation within the context of a fair housing law. And so to your point, that's kind of why these questions are geared that way, is because within what we tell HUD are the impediments to fair housing choice in California, those are the only things that we have some sort of authority over. For housing on tribal lands, that's absolutely the priority of the department, of our tribal affairs team here at HCD. It's just, and our, certainly those inequities are something we want to illuminate and will bring up in our report. But again, within kind of the fair housing law, fair housing choice context, those laws simply don't apply on tribal lands. And again, because of the sovereign status of our tribal nations.
Gotcha. So those would probably be two separate issues then, or two separate listening sessions if they wanted to do something like that.
Right. Separate, but also at the same time, all very, very intertwined.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kaylee. Okay. So I have Nicole again, or not Nicole.
Hello, sorry. Yes, this is Jessie. I just had a question of how are you promoting this listening session as an option? Is it just on your website? Because I know with myself, I wouldn't have known about this listening session if it wasn't for my colleagues that had brought this to my attention, and speaking with other individuals throughout the state that I brought this attention to them. They weren't aware of this as well. So I was just wondering, how are you showcasing this as an invite for individuals to attend and give you feedback?
Yeah, thank you, Jessie. So how this was advertised was mostly through our email e-blasts that go out to our tribal listservs from both our general HCD email blasts as well as our specific CIAP, California Indian Assistance Program teams. And so that goes out to all the tribal contacts we have, general email addresses for tribes and tribal administrators, but also specific housing contacts we have at tribes. I also did some outreach to different institutions, health or in Native health institutions and things like that, serving tribal folks. But to your point, and we encounter this a lot at the department, you know, we know email is not sufficient. We know the barriers that we face with communication, we face on our end, kind of imposed barriers, right? Of just the way that we're used to doing things, which is not the best way to communicate. We certainly know that, and certainly understand the need to kind of fill those gaps and do more comprehensive, more real, like relationship-based outreach.
Thank you, Jesse. Alice, you want to go ahead and unmute?
Thank you. Yes, I know that I really appreciate this opportunity for this listening session and gathering it, because there is a big disparity of our people, especially in, we don't have, as a small tribe, we have inadequate housing. We don't have enough land base to serve all of our tribal members. And it makes things very hard to even consider outside places when there's not enough housing already within the counties joining us to even find appropriate housing to help our people. And as far as outreach, I think this is a good start. Public documentation, if you send out a flyer, I'd be happy to share that with the people that I come in contact with through our tribes, and I'm sure other tribes would probably do the same thing. And there's more than just housing. There's also health and human services on every rancheria. And if you call, or reservation, if you call their main office, they would probably give you the connection to those entities that could share the information. So it's just a help. But again, thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for commenting. It looks like Eliana.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Hi, HCD folks. This is Eliana Chavez. I'm from CCRH. I'm a Tribal TA program manager. Hopped on here just to see what the discussion is going on around. And I think it would have been helpful to understand what lens you are discussing fair housing, because fair housing is a California state policy. And since we're talking here with tribes who follow federal housing guidelines, there is that distinction. And I feel like that's where some of this confusion may be coming from. And so I know you were trying to just lead into the, what is good practicing fair housing for tribes, but then we went into only on fee land. And so that's where I'm just like, oh, okay, like, I really had to filter my ideas and then my thoughts in order to provide feedback once others were questioning the same thing. So if this type of listening session is to continue, I would suggest having some kind of background of where you are coming from. Like, hey, the state has this fair housing policy. And then, hey, this is what we've learned on how it does or does not apply with tribal governments and Native communities in California. And then, hey, these are the problems that we've encountered thus far. And then get into people's and representatives' experience in housing. And then, I mean, I'm sure maybe you'll follow up of like, this is what we're thinking of doing. This is our follow-up. This is our next steps. A timeline is also great. I know you kind of shared one about that, but I'm also not in tune with all the lingo that you had in there. So I was like, well, what does that mean? When are we going to hear back, essentially? And so so that's where I just wanted to provide some of that feedback to this listening session, and definitely want to reiterate to what Laura, and apologize for saying your name incorrectly, from Big Sandy, that yeah, having these more accessible to folks, because I'm sure you all are well aware that not many tribal communities have access to broadband. And so this being hosted through Zoom requires a lot of technology that may not be accessible to tribes. or to people that you're trying to connect. And so if there is some way to do that type of connection, being in person, driving out to the community and talking with them, is also another way to get that. And yes, definitely sharing it as much as you can to those that you have in your listserv, your tribal listserv. We tried our best in trying to get it out to folks, but sorry, I'm just giving a whole lot of feedback. Your newsletter was so jargony that I was like, please cut this down to say this is about how to get access to housing, instead of having this long basically hiding the the intention of your newsletter. It was a lot, and so I had to filter through all of that and be like, hey, it's a webinar, it's a listening session, come talk about your housing obstacles. Is another part. We tribes, as you yourselves may also encounter, you have a lot of emails to go through and you want to go through them quickly. I don't want to sit down for a minute to try to decipher, is this something I'm interested or not? So just wanted to provide that when we're talking about outreach, because it's great to do outreach, but it's also great to do purposefully and effective outreach. So always thinking about what's in it for the audience that you're trying to reach is a great way to start when we're doing these types of activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ileana. We do provide a certain amount of information in our e-blasts. We do have to provide a little bit of background into what we're having the session for, not just about. But I will say, as far as any in-person meetings about this are concerned, we will, between the middle of July and the middle of August, we will go ahead and do our public comment period, in which we're going to be doing that in person. We do not have the locations reserved yet. We're still scouting, but we're looking probably around Redding-ish, somewhere in Northern California. There will definitely be one in Sacramento, somewhere in Central, maybe Fresno, Visalia, something like that. And we'll be down in Southern California as well, in person, taking comments. And again, that'll be between the middle of July, middle of August, between those dates. And we will, of course, make announcements about that as soon as anything is finalized. I'm going to move over to, I hope you'll forgive me if I mispronounce your name. Nia Keda. Can you unmute? Are you there? If you're able to unmute, go ahead. Okay, I'm going to jump over to Alice, but I'll keep you there in the queue. And Alice.
Thank you. If there is a targeted population of talking to our homeless people, and you only have so many listening sessions, and there's 110 tribes, and our homeless people often don't have phones, don't have transportation, how do you reach them?
Hi, Alice. This is Douglas. That is a very
Hi,
good
Doug.
question. Hi, how are you?
It's been a long time. Good to see you.
Yes, ma'am. We are trying our best, but we are going to look at Tribe, that we already have communication with. We're going to ask for support and assistance on how to best reach out to other tribes that HCD have not been in contact with, right? I think HCD today only reach out to properly, I say, 70 or 75% of the 110 federally recognized tribes in California. And we have no idea how to reach out to the remainder of the tribe out there, right? So I think we're gonna need, support and assistance from the people that we are already in contact with. And again, that is the plan. But if you have any other ideas, we here at ACD, happy to listen and to take guidance from you.
For our people, we're very rural, as you know, and we don't have public transportation up here, and we don't have access to a lot of internet or broadband or whatever it is. And if we're trying to reach our homeless people, there are 10 tribes in our county, and I don't know about the others, but I would suggest reaching out to the individual tribes and say, how can we do this to reach the most amount of people from your tribe to get a handle on this? There's nothing hard about asking for that assistance. And I know you saw when you came here many years ago how hard and how far away we were from everything. And our homeless people are in that same predicament, but they don't even have access like we have to cars or transportation or phones. And everything has to be brought in or taken somewhere, and that means relying upon other people. So in order to do that, we would want to have enough time to make sure all of our members got the information ahead of time if there was going to be a meeting here. And I know other tribal communities, an hour away, 3 hours away, 6 hours away, all within our county. So it's very difficult. And I don't know if every county has a tribe, but there are out of the 58 counties, there are tribes in almost every one of them.
Got it. Thank you for that advice, Alice.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's try this again. Again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, but Nayaketa, are you able to unmute? Nothing still. Okay, I'll keep you in the queue just in case you're having technical difficulties. Let's see. Okay, so now I have 2 Nicole Mendozas with their hands up. So again, I think it's a couple of people logged in under the same account. I'm going to call on a Nicole Mendoza, and I'll give you a prompt to go ahead and unmute.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, this is Jessie, which is weird. It has my picture. I just had a question, and I may have missed this part in the discussion, and I apologize, but I understand, there's a lot of outreach to Native organizations that you have connection with. You're trying to reach with tribes, things of that nature. But is there an effort to connect with the non-federally recognized tribal communities in California? They're the ones that primarily need the resources and the support. I mean, all Indigenous people need the support and these resources, but the ones that are not federally recognized, they don't get any resources, any support, very limited in what they have access to. And regards to that, with your in-person session that you're planning in the summertime era, as it was stated, it's not going to be accessible for everyone, especially for individuals that live in extremely rural areas, individuals that are homeless. Is there a way or a plan to kind of have multiple of those sessions in different regions of the state with different outlet options, rather that be in person, to also include a webinar link for individuals who can't attend in person, a call-in link, write down your response and send it in. That kind of situation is what I was wondering.
Absolutely. So the public comment period is going to be open for 30 days anyhow. And during that time, you can write in your responses. We're going to be doing the in-person hearings, and those should be simulcast as well. We're looking for places that can offer hybrid meetings where it can be attended in person, and we can also have the meeting via Zoom at the same time to take comment both ways. So it's certainly not meant to be exclusionary by any means. We're actually just trying to, within the budget that we have for it, trying to hit sort of some hubs in the state, but we do want to make it as accessible as we can for those who can't attend in person. So again, we'll send all of that information out once we have it available.
Yeah, can I address the other concern about reaching out to non-federally recognized tribe? Yeah, so we actually do that. So currently HCD, we have two separate efforts, right? One is with the Fair Housing Lens, and then the other is with the Tribal Fair Unit. So Tribal Fair Unit, we are, internally advocating for tribe. We're also, reaching out to all tribe in California to, to ask if any tribe need technical assistance, if they need any anything at all, to give them, the access to ACD programs. So those are the separate effort than the fair housing effort that we're doing today, right? And again, Jesse, we would love to reach out to you after this call, and let's have a quick meeting and kind of go over different strategy, because we always look for improvement, on how to communicate with tribe in rural area. And I personally would love to visit every single tribe within California, but again, that is a very wishful thinking, and again, that's going to be a long term, maybe the next 3-5 years or however. But with tribe community, assistance and support, I would love to visit every single tribe throughout California if that's available, for me and my team to go out there and provide a technical assistance or provide anything at all. We're happy to do it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Douglas. I still have 2 Nicoles, which I think maybe Jessie might have raised her hand again, but I'm going to go with the other Nicole first, just by going in order. Are you able to unmute?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, yeah, so I tried registering under a different account and it still shows up as Nicole Mendoza, my supervisor, so hopefully that gets fixed sometime. But this is Ramey Kino with Disability Rights California. I will preface that I am not Indigenous, but continue to seek ways to support Indigenous folks in my education and advocacy. My thoughts come from a perspective of higher education, having already graduated, but I did want to point out someone had said how Indigenous folks seek housing off tribal lands for opportunities. And from my limited observations, it may be worthwhile for HCD to evaluate how to support access to fair housing for Indigenous folks living either near colleges, universities, or even trade schools. The areas that, Indigenous folks go to have more opportunities, as someone had pointed out. I can only imagine that tribal community organizations in surrounding areas of these places or school organizations themselves can provide direct informative access to how to better support these communities in their access to fair housing, especially when, they're trying to get better opportunities for themselves and their communities. So that is something I wanted to point out. And some issues I've heard from Indigenous folks is regarding criteria or eligibility to be considered an Indigenous person and access, how that relates to access to different programs. And I imagine that can relate to access to fair housing. And also challenges with what is considered household income, the discrepancies with that. Some people who may be living alone but have support with their family members. How does that relate to criteria for access to fair housing? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I'm going to bounce over to, I'm going to assume that I'm talking to Jessie.
Yes, hi. I just had one more general question. Are there any Indigenous staff members you have that are working with you in this program or for your organization at all? Because I do feel that that would be very beneficial for your program, not only for your program, but for our Indigenous community, is to have our people doing the work and supporting the work that is to be done.
Yes, Amy and Mary, can you do a quick introduction, please?
Hi, hey, nice to meet you. I'm Mary. I'm from the Colville Confederated Tribes. And thank you for your question. I'll let Amy introduce herself too. But I really appreciate all of your comments, and definitely am looking forward to connecting with you after this. Since this is primarily a HUD focused event, Amy and I haven't been as involved. Most of our focus is on tribal access to HCD programs, and so we haven't been really as involved in listening session, but I'm really glad that we were able to be a part of it and hear from you all. So thank you.
Yes, hi, I'm Amy Lopez. I'm a member of the Choctaw Nation. I do work here at HCD in Tribal Affairs with Mary and Zach and Doug. Yeah, we primarily work with our HCD housing programs, and you know, try to assist and be advocates for tribes, and try to identify any barriers to access to our tribal folks, or to our tribes. But yeah, this is our fair housing, our listening session. There's many aspects to tribal funding, and with tribes and fair housing is one of them. And I, as with Mary, I haven't been that involved in this session, but I'm doing some things. You know, we do things behind the scenes. So yeah.
Thank you both. Okay, so I'm gonna, we've got a few minutes left here, and it looks like I have Naya Keda again here. So let's see if we can.
Oh, I came up, so I must be working now.
Oh
Greetings.
yeah,
Can
we can
everyone
hear
hear
you.
me?
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm learning today just in regards to the tribes and how the process worked, and then also a lot of the challenges that they have been experiencing where they are. It's like there's a lot of rural areas that the tribal communities are in that's causing, you know, a lot of delays and some issues as far as participating in certain programs, as far as being educated in certain programs. And to piggyback on the what the lady said earlier in regards to having someone that is going to be more to them more trustworthy, someone that can relate to them and understand, you know, some of what they're going through as being a tribe member, and also be able to point them in the right direction and being patient with them, because even with the general public, that's a lot of the confusion and also the issues that they have with having someone from either fair housing, HUD, or different people come up to them to engage and ask for insider information or try to connect them with housing. They're somewhat very hesitant as far as giving up information. And if they have someone that look like them or understands their background, they're more open to receiving that type of help, and just to help them understand the language behind, you know, fair housing and HUD, because let's be honest, it's a different language. I understand the language because I worked for HUD for over 25 years, so I understand the language. But when I communicate with the general public, anyone, doesn't matter what background they are, I tend to kind of alter that language in order for the person to understand and to know that I'm there to support them and their needs. So I just wanted to piggyback on that and just hear as a listening ear to understand it better and to see how I can be of a help to any of the tribes as possible if they need it. That's all I had to say. Thank you for hearing me out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, so at the moment, we don't have any hands raised. We have just a couple of minutes left here. Again, if anything comes up, any thoughts come up after this, any questions that you have come up after this, you can go ahead and send them into AI Fair Housing Report at hcd.ca.gov. That inbox is being monitored daily, and we're going to continue checking it. Our public comment period, again, will be open between the middle of July and the middle of August. That'll be the time that we travel. We will do the in-person hearings across the state. We're looking at least 4 locations. And again, we'll be simulcasting that through Zoom as well. But if we don't have any hands raised, I guess we can go ahead and end the session. So thank you all so much for coming today and sharing your thoughts with us. We see some questions here in the Q&A. We'll do a little research and get back to everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate hearing from you all today. Thank you.